Exhibition Road, you've probably heard about again. Very, very ambitious plans to introduce shared space to Exhibition Road.
In where?
Exhibition Road.
In where? Which town?
Oh, sorry, in London.
Right.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Thought you were. I don't know. Kensington.
Right.
Exhibition Road goes past all the museums, Victorian Albert Museum, the Science Museum. It goes from Hyde Park down to Kensington, and quite busy, dual carriageway. And what they intend to do is completely repave it. One side is intended to be for traffic, one side for pedestrians. Street lights mark the boundary. So half of the dual carriageway is given over to pedestrians. The other half is mixed between traffic and pedestrians. And they're developing the designs in some detail now. And there was some doubt about funding, but I read recently that I think some funding has now been secured to make it happen. So it's obviously going to. You can see the quality of the treatment is going to be very high paving quality, but that is due to happen. Okay, and there's a kind of what's meant to be a driver's view of it. If you went there now, it's a fairly standard, quite elegant standard dual carriageway street. Not actually that busy. It kind of runs north-south. The main routes there in that part of London are all running east-west, so it's a kind of connector route, much wider than it needs to be for the volume of traffic. But it's a very important place in terms of the buildings that line it. So that's hopefully going to happen. And I know that there's some work being done with Imperial College, which is actually on that street, to look at different ways of using detectable strips for blind and partially sighted people to use to negotiate their way through that very wide space. Okay, just to finish off, what issues are there to overcome? If you want to do this stuff, what are you going to overcome? Well, we know there's a big issue about the disabled. The disabled lobby are campaigning actively against shared space. They've written to lots of local authorities saying don't do it. Quite high profile, and that's particularly blind and partially sighted people. There's a whole question of, a lot of people say, well, what if someone gets hurt? Is it my fault? What, risk and liability. If we deviate from standard practice and we do something radical like this, are we going to get sued as a local authority? Question of safety audit, I'd love to do that, but the safety auditor won't let me. It never passed safety audit. How do we get around that? Okay, well, the disabled people. The concept that seems to be emerging is you've got shared space, and the disabled groups are saying that's fine. If you want to share the space, you go ahead. We don't want to. So we want safe space. We want part of the street where we're not going to mix with traffic, where we're not going to step in front of a vehicle without knowing about it, and we need to know when we're in that safe space, and we need to know when we're leaving it. Yeah. So a lot of the focus now is on delineators, some kind of means of people who have limited sight being able to detect when they move from one part to another. They've fair play to the Guide Dogs for the Blind. They commissioned some research on this. They actually used Ramboll Nijvig, which is a Danish consultancy that's done work with Jan Gehl, so they've got some experience of doing this on the continent. And they tested a whole series of different ways, not just for blind people, but also wheelchair users. Because if you have something lumpy and bumpy that you cross over to get into one part of the street to another, if you're in a wheelchair, that's not so good. What they seemed to come down to after this was either using a detectable strip that would say, when I follow this strip, I know I'm in a safe place, or some kind of chamfered distinction between the trafficked area and the non-trafficked area.
What does that word mean,
Sorry? Chamfered. So it would be like, instead of having a vertical curve, you would have a slope to it. So it maybe those are the real dimensions. So 50 millimeters height, 200 millimeters long. So just a gentle slope is replacing the curve. So there's your carriageway and your mixed space. You don't want a kind of big curve that says very strongly pedestrian space, carriageway space, but you might have just a gentle slope. Now there's an issue if that slope is too severe and you're in a wheelchair, you can't get up it. You're kind of stuck in the carriageway space. So you can't please everybody. So, but they seem to think that a shallow slope was something you could detect with a cane, and something you could get up in a wheelchair. Okay. or you have something within the safe space that if you follow it, then you stay within the safe space and you leave it and you know when you're leaving it. So that, and I think they're carrying more research out on this, and the work of Imperial College on the exhibition road scheme I think is going to take this a little further. So dialogue is going on. Okay, about the risk and liability thing, this is just a general thing. This is something that's in Manual for Streets, if you want to read more about it. This case, Gorringe versus Calderdale, there's a lady, Mrs. Gorringe. She went out in her car one day, went over a humpback bridge and had an accident. And she blamed the local authority, and she said, it's not my fault because there used to be a marking on the road that said slow, and it got worn out, so I went too fast and I had an accident, so it's the local authority's fault. And it went all the way to the House of Lords, and the House of Lords said, no, it's not the local authority's fault, it's your fault. And they said, first of all, we mustn't have a society where every time someone has a misfortune, they can blame somebody, which seems fair enough. And then Lord Hoffman said that people take responsibility for their own actions, the users of the highway look after themselves, drivers of vehicles must take and that's what the law says. So the likelihood of you being sued for a design fault is actually very limited. Lots of local authorities get sued for faults of maintenance, trips and slips and things, but there are very few successful prosecutions for design. Okay, safety audit. Again, just to kind of put safety audit a little bit in its box, this again is quoted from Manual for Streets. The design team is not governed by the road safety audit. There is no sense in which a scheme passes or fails road safety audit. Road safety audit is a check or a review by a road safety auditor of a design to advise the design team, but the design team is not duty bound to take it on board. They can write an exception report and say that's what the auditor thinks, but for these reasons we decide to do something different, and that is entirely your ability to do that as a design team. And there are some other kind of pointers to we should have dialogue with the auditors and try and negotiate it rather than being faced with a denial of the design at the end. And just to say, you can do safety audits. Brighton was safety audited, and these are some comments from the road safety auditor who went to Brighton and said the nature and use of the street has changed completely. The street now has a distinct character, the ambience of a pedestrianised zone. Motorists appear to behave as though they are intruders in the street. And as I say, there's nothing physical to make that change. There's no bumps, there's no change of level, there's no chicanes, it's dead straight, it's dead flat. But the environment is making them go slowly. And the safety auditor made some few detailed comments, but didn't undermine the principle of the scheme. Okay, to finish off, just to say, the Department of Transport Research, in the last week or so, been awarded to a consortium I'm very pleased to be involved with. Transport Research Laboratory, MVA Consultancy, Atkins, great pile of people, doing some research for Department of Transport on shared space. These are some of its aims: appraise shared space, investigate operational issues, propose design solutions, comprehensive guidance document, great, and produce a report. But 2 years. Please don't wait for it, because there's lots of evidence to show that it's happening now. You don't have to wait for this. It's you can perhaps maybe take comfort from the fact that the Department for Transport considers it to be worthy of a 2-year study, that there's enough benefits that are coming through of this to show that it can be applied in the UK. So there's my conclusions really, and I think so the schemes that we've seen in Chambéry and other parts of Northern Europe, we are beginning to see them happen in the UK, and I can see no reason why. Some people say the culture is different here. I'm not sure it is. I think there's no reason why we can't see those schemes happen here. Okay, thank you.